The Khutbah today is dedicated to Black History Month, or I can say what I've learned from Black History Month. The first thing was a lecture that really got my attention, very emotional. Some of the audience were crying, to be honest. It was an ICNA event, and Ismail Abdullah, the speaker, was going into the atrocities of slavery. And like most of you, if you grew up in since kindergarten, we've heard about slavery. Right? I remember our kindergarten teacher showed us like a cartoon of like kids that went back in time, and then they saw MLK and I Have a Dream, and she told us, I love you all, whether you're white, black, brown, purple, yellow, pink, green, if you're rainbow, I love you all. We're trying to fight racism, basically. And since then, as early as elementary school, we learned about racism, we learned about slavery, we learned about the Native Americans, we learned US history, at least briefly. But this was in depth about slavery, and I honestly didn't know how bad it was, I'm being honest. But this was something that will stick with me forever, and one of the highlights for me this last month. Some of the pictures, I don't know how graphic we should get, but some of the pictures showed the bodies. I say bodies, as Imam al-Suman said, he says, we say bodies not because we see them only as bodies, but because they were seen only as bodies. We'll speak of police brutality and black bodies soon. The bodies were laid just the way you lay luggage, just as efficient as possible, just trying to stack them. They didn't care. If someone vomited, someone was sick, everyone else gets sick. If you're just too much trouble, they just throw you off the boat. And this might not be new to most of you, but seeing some of those images and hearing a lecture on that, it hit home, and it kind of made me rethink, some of the things that we complain about. So that was number one. And number two, again, most of you might know this, but maybe some of you don't. There was a good sizable fraction of the African slaves that were brought to the US that were in fact Muslim. Some say a third, some say 10%. I don't think it really matters. The point is it was a fraction. We're talking possibly 1 million people that came here as slaves that were Muslim. And among the many challenges they had, all sorts of challenges, physical, mental abuse, all sorts, some of the challenges they had was to preserve their identity, to be Muslim when their masters would not allow them to pray, or not allow them to drink the Quran. Higher? That's why I asked, okay, no problem. Better? Higher? I learned that MalcolmX, sizable fraction of them are Muslim. So why is that relevant? It's relevant because today, among the themes of Muslim khutbahs and durus and halaqat, and you go to the masjid, it's about protecting our identity of young Muslims. Well, this isn't new, right? Every generation, every time period, and every place, they had an issue about protecting their identity, protecting their values and principles. Muslims throughout history, not at all times, because certain times our challenge was that things were good, things were prosperous. People came from all over the world to our hospitals and our universities. That was a part of our history for hundreds of years. But for hundreds of years, and the current modern predicament is kind of like 500 years old. Right? MalcolmX used to say, 400 years is long enough. Right? Speaking about slavery and post-slavery. Well, really the colonialist project, which includes slavery and Palestine and Israel and so much more, is a 500-year project. Dr. Hassan Bazzi gave an excellent lecture about that. But in those 500 years, there were many groups of people that struggled with their identity. So we can feel with them. Really straightforward, their issues were a lot harder than ours. And this folks have been in the 50s and 60s, that people had it even harder. Some of these slaves were scholars in their countries, some of them were princes in their countries. Some of them could read and write and their masters couldn't. Some of them knew Arabic and then learned English. Some of them went around and actually gave speeches and lectures and wrote books and wrote their own biographies, all right? I know some of you know this, but some of you didn't. To me, this was mind-blowing. There was a slave, supposedly a slave, but how can you be a slave when you're that free, right? He wrote the Quran from memory 3 times by hand while working 18 hours a day in the field. I don't know how he did that. It's amazing. And I think he was like a scholar of the Maliki Madhab. So this is no joke, but this is definitely something we don't learn in school. And that's again one of the things that we don't learn in school. I learned that MalcolmX was the culmination of a struggle that included many more individuals, many other individuals, many organizations and so on. There was a movement. Because we commonly hear about MalcolmX and khutbahs and durus and halaqat, but we don't hear much about Rosa Parks and Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. And obviously we can't go into their struggles, but MalcolmX was the pinnacle of a movement. I learned that. I learned that MLK was a lot more than just, I have a dream. It's definitely part of his story, but it's not the only thing. I think he was in prison for like 18 times. We don't learn that in school. Right? He was against militarism and US foreign policy, very relevant today. He was against Vietnam. He was influenced by MalcolmX. We don't learn that in school. Right? We're sold on this painting of the violent, hateful, intolerant Muslim, MalcolmX, and the I have a dream, loving, peaceful, tolerant Christian, MLK. That's an insult to both of their lives and legacies. And it's not true. It's disingenuous. It's a lie. It's twisted. It's a twisted narrative. And all it does, it further puts down Muslims and really anyone wants to speak truth to power. I love that there are parts of Muhammad Ali's life that aren't so well known. He's possibly the most famous person alive. He's not alive. A lot of mercy on him. He died 2 years ago. But still today, he's possibly the most famous person on the planet, the most recognized face and name. If not, he's up there. I can probably say that he's the most famous Muslim in the history of America. That's no small thing, right? But there are parts of his life that aren't as well known. Everybody knows that he went to Rome, the Olympics, and represented the United States and won gold medal at like 18, 19 years old. Defeated Tony Liston and became the heavyweight champion of the world at 22. Got his title and heavyweight championship. his title and boxing license stripped away. Two different things, by the way. We'll get into that. Stripped away from him at 22. And eventually he won it back, and then decades of humanitarian work and service and da'wah, speaking about Islam and Muslims at the highest platforms, using his global platform for good, speaking to celebrities and leaders around the world. We know that, but I want to focus on one part of the story that I didn't know so well. At 22 years old, after defeating Sonny Liston, being the heavyweight champion of the world, I think possibly the youngest to ever do so, they took away his title, heavyweight champion, they took away his belt. They also took away his boxing license, which is the equivalent of saying losing your job. He got fired, right? And for the last 10 years, 12 years old, he started training. At 22, he's heavyweight champion. That's his career. That's his job. That's his source of income. That's his source of risk. That's how he pays the bills and takes care of his family. He lost that. It was a very easy decision, a very tough decision. All he had to do, and you guys know, when he said no to Vietnam, he wasn't going to pick up a gun and go and actually fight. No one would do that. No one would make him do that. He just had to wear red, white, and blue and maybe dance a little bit and say a few words. How easy. And possibly even gain a bigger following and more money and more fame and would set him up for bigger fights, and the rest would be made. His history would be made. They chose a much tougher option, which is tough at 22. Some of you guys are 22, so just try to put yourself in his shoes. He said no, and there's so much to unpack. There's so many wisdoms in him saying no and why he said no. So I'll try my best to do it justice, but it's really tough. From 22 to 25, he was fighting the draft, right? And believe it or not, at 25 years old, which is my age, he was here in Houston, Texas. He was going up against his most formidable opponent, toughest opponent, U.S. government. And eventually he wins 8-0 in the Supreme Court. Muhammad Ali versus the United States. It's amazing. But in those 3 years, he's almost flipping burgers at McDonald's. He's just doing jobs here and there, just barely enough to pay the bills. Right? He wasn't flipping burgers, but the point was he's doing whatever job he can get. So he struggled. And you might think, if anyone gave you the two options, struggle or sacrifice for 3 years, and then live 30, 40, 50 years of fame and money and generally good life, I think everybody would say that, would pick that option. But it's not that easy. Because in those 3 years, you don't know that it's going to be only 3 years. You don't know that it's going to end soon. You don't know what's going to happen. You just know that he had these two choices. He made a really tough choice. But Allah's wisdom, Allah's mercy. It was 3 years and the rest is history. MalcolmX and MLK had a different story. And all of them have their lessons for us to learn. Obviously, MLK and MalcolmX both being assassinated at 39. Muhammad Ali passing away a couple years ago. And Allah have mercy on him. I also learned that as a result of the civil rights struggle, the US began expanding its immigration policy. Right? How's that relevant? It's very relevant. It couldn't be more relevant to us, this audience specifically here. And I know there are people that are black, white, Asian, Hispanic, etc. here. The vast majority of you, like me, your parents came here in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or onwards. And it's a direct result of the civil rights struggle that the US expanded its, allowed brown people and black people and people of color to come in, basically. People came from Pakistan and Egypt and India and Jordan, Indonesia, Nigeria, and so on. I also learned that slavery may have ended, but racism, oppression, discrimination did not end in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Don't let people tell you it's just history. But that was a long time ago. Just get over it. Just forget about it. How about Alvin Sterling, or Stephen Clark, or Tamir Rice, or Neil Wilson, or Botham Jean, or Trayvon Martin? He was 17 years old, he was returning home, and he was unarmed, and he was gunned down. And that's just one of many. And there's an analogy that's being made. People write articles about him and Emmett Till, which is decades before him, another young black kid, has his own story. It's disgusting. Look it up. If you've never heard the name Emmett Till, look it up. And police brutality is only one of the many issues that are plaguing our society. It's not just domestic, right? Police brutality is a domestic issue. There are issues on the global level. Palestine isn't liberated yet. I didn't know that MalcolmX actually visited Gaza. I knew that he traveled around the world and met with leaders. I didn't know that he visited Gaza, among other places. He recognized the twin evils of European colonialism, can include Zionism, and American dollarism, right? And MLK spoke about militarism, US foreign policy. It's connected. Nelson Mandela said that our freedom isn't complete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Pretty famous quote. And it's not just Palestine, because America's war machine has devastated countries all over the world. I love it. I absolutely love the fact that he said that I can't go to Vietnam. I can't fight over there because I'm Muslim. Allah would not allow me to go fight an unjust war. I love it. I don't know if anybody can tell me why, but I love it because today one of the biggest accusations and insults and just trash that's thrown at Muslims, which we hear over and over until we kind of absorb it, is that Islam is hateful, intolerant, we're violent, Muslims are violent, and they love war. The most famous Muslim in American history did not fight the war, although it was very tough for him to do so, very easy for him to do so, did not because he's Muslim. He said, Allah would not want me to fight over there. And the continuation of that quote was beautiful. He was called unpatriotic and un-American. Even the city that he was from, Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know Louisville, Kentucky, except because of Muhammad Ali. They named their airport after him. But at that time, they said, we want to revoke your citizenship. I have no idea what that means. To be honest, his ancestry goes back to before the United States was a country. His ancestry were slaves. So they said, we want to revoke your citizenship. It's trash talk, but it's psychological. The same city that said they want to revoke your citizenship named their international airport after Muhammad Ali. So, I mean, it's an honor. I don't think every president in the United States even has an airport named after them, so it's cool. But he said that I'm not going to join because I'm Muslim. So it's a good example for you. So when you hear all the questions and criticism that comes your way, do your best not to internalize it, right? Don't let it get to you. Islam does not encourage us to join wars. Islam is a religion that encourages us to be a part of the efforts of peace, and that war can be inevitable. So not the other way around. So he did not join the war machine. I learned about Imam Warith Muhammad, a name that I knew, but I didn't know much of his story. I learned this from Imam Wazir Ali and other leaders in Houston. They had great talks. Imam Warith Muhammad basically took up leadership after MalcolmX. He was the son of Elijah Muhammad, who started the Nation of Islam. MalcolmX split with him. I'm trying to keep it brief. MalcolmX split, and then passed away soon afterwards. Imam Warith Muhammad, for decades later, he led what they call the Black Muslims. He oversaw the biggest mass conversion of people to Islam in the history of America. Possibly the greatest mass conversion of any religion to any religion. But importantly to us, to Islam. About 1 million people possibly. Right? Imagine teaching 1 million people how to make wudu and how to pray. That's like, and it's worse, they weren't Christian. We have to teach them like, okay, now you're Muslim, well now we pray, we fast, we do this. No. They thought they were Muslim. We know that they weren't so. And then they had understood that they weren't, but that's confusing. And now he has 1 million people, no internet, no social media, and he needs to teach them wudu and salah and all the basics. People that thought they were Muslim, that had already been tricked, and then tricked again. Now he needs to teach them the truth. Can you imagine being in that situation? Imagine having the responsibility of there's 1 million people he's been to, like Imam Muhammad and MalcolmX, they had traveled the world. They'd seen scholars in Egypt and Saudi, and they went to Palestine, they visited Pakistan, and they got the global picture, they don't understand what Islam is. They understood Quran and Sunnah, and these are people that have been, for hundreds of years being persecuted in the US, and they wanted Islam because this is gonna clean them up personally, and as a society, it's gonna give them a source of values and principles, and it's gonna help them go up against their oppressors. And they also recognize that Islam is kind of like the true religion, the original religion, where we said a third or a fourth of slaves were Muslim. So they believed in it strongly, but they weren't that educated on Quran and Sunnah. So he had the responsibility of teaching 1 million people about Islam, even the basics. Imagine that, for decades. He's considered one of the imams, if not the imam of America. Amazing. I didn't know much about the story. So what's the point of talking about all this? What's the point of talking about, Black Lives Matter, or Palestine, or Israel, or Black History Month, or Muslim Black History Week? What's like? It might be fun and cool to some, it might be boring to others, I don't know, everyone has their interests, I always liked history. What's the actual purpose? Is there something deeper? Is it just certain names and stories and history and dates and cool quotes, Muhammad Ali quotes? And some of his videos are, even from decades ago, are viral today, millions and millions of views. And they're still super relevant, right? He was a da'i at the highest level, right? One of the top da'is of the 20th century, in addition to being the top athlete of the 20th century, right? The most famous Muslim American. So it's exciting, right? There's a lot of accolades and a lot of great hashtags, trending hashtags, a lot of cool quotes. But it's got to be more than that, and it is. One of the famous quotes at that time was, "Black is beautiful." I found this interesting. I was like, okay, I get it at the surface, but I always wanted to understand it better. I'm like, a black leader is speaking to a black audience and saying black is beautiful. If it's a white leader or when I say black and white, anyone else, right? Speaking to an audience of anyone else telling them black is beautiful, I can kind of get it. But why would a black leader tell a black audience black is beautiful? And they're like, Everyone get what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense originally, but there's a reason for it. The concept is called internalized racism, right? And the bridge and the analogy, the parallel is internalized Islamophobia. So it is very relevant. It's not just the 50s and 60s, right? When you're oppressed for so long, when you're insulted for so long, when you're under the boot for so long, you eventually kind of, at least a good chunk of your community, if not everyone, starts internalizing that hate and that fear and that toxicity. So you start accepting it, right? It's not so politically correct to talk about it, but I gotta go into this. There's a good number, and this is MalcolmX then saying, there's a good number of blacks at that time that still had the slave mentality. Remember, slavery had ended 50s, 60s, 70s. Their issue wasn't slavery. But he was speaking to an audience saying, some of you still have the slave mentality, right? You still do your hair in a way that makes you look white because you think white looks better. And if you think about it, whites, we're generalizing, were richer, more powerful, more educated. They had degrees, they had power, right? So you start thinking they're better and I gotta be more like them. Internalized racism. You might even start hating others who are proud to be black. So that was an issue that they dealt with. Today we deal with internalized Islamophobia. You might start thinking that maybe Islam is intolerant. Maybe Islam is, we hate other people, or like if you want to really stick to it, if you want to be a literalist, quote unquote, you want to be a literalist, you really want to apply the Quran and Sunnah, or maybe you're going to end up like ISIS. It's not the truth. We wish ISIS would follow the Quran and Sunnah. We wish they were traditionalists and they were orthodox. They're actually modernists. They're responding to the modern issue of American militarism and American foreign policy. It's a modern issue. It's not an Islamic issue. People didn't pick up the Quran and Sunnah and say, I want to get closer to Allah, and they joined ISIS. People have been reading the Quran and Sunnah for 1400 years. ISIS was free a few years ago. So don't let people play mess with your head, okay? What they're doing is unacceptable. But really what's happening is that there's two small groups and they're just responding to each other. And 99.something% of people in the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, in the US and the Middle East, were the victims. Alright? So there's the Trump and the Trump supporters and the Islamophobes on the left and the right. That should be another khutbah, by the way. Because a lot of us as young Muslims, I'm only a few years older than most of you. I mean, we're kind of in the same boat. I recognize that it's very easy to join to feel that you have to choose sides, first of all, which you don't have to, left and right. You feel if one group is directly attacking you and the other says we love everybody, it's natural, you want to side with them. I know it's tough, you're 1% of the population. It's tough to say we have our own values, our own principles, we're trying to build up our own community, right? It's tough, I know it's tough. But internalized Islamophobia is real, right? I've seen it in the Middle East and I've seen it here. It's very common for Muslims to not feel loud and proud about their faith, feel that they're afraid to do so. And that is basically the theme of this Khutbah, or one of the themes, my parting message, is be loud and proud about your faith. You really have a few options. This is the reality. You can put your head in the sand, you can act like nothing's going on. You can, unfortunately, and I'll be real with you, and I've seen it with my own eyes, people I've grown up with, people that were Muslim, practicing memories of the Quran and everything, and I'm sure every one of you has heard of the story or knows a friend that have decided that leaving the faith is the best option for them. May Allah protect us all, and may Allah make it easy for them. They're probably struggling with something. Somebody's mother could have died. They might speak about, this is from my experience, someone could speak about atheism and say, well, do you really have proof for God's existence? And then I start like debating them with God's existence, and if you want, there's plenty of videos on YouTube with great content. But they might say that, the real issue was that their mother died and they don't know how to deal with that, because it's sad, it's tough. Somebody's sick in their family, right? Or they heard some imam or some scholar say something that was true, just it was unacceptable for them. And maybe the scholar was right and maybe they were wrong. Both happens, they're human beings. Whatever the issue is, you probably know people in your life that are feeling that it's very tough to be Muslim today, right? So that's an option. You can leave the faith. That's the reality, right? Obviously, I'm not encouraging you to do so. Nor putting your head in the sand. The third option, be loud and proud about your faith and inspire others to do so. Allah has the picture and we have the pixel. It's one of my favorite quotes. So naturally, you should put your trust in Allah. You love Allah, you fear Allah. And know that being proud about your faith might make you unpopular, right? Muhammad Ali wasn't unpopular for a time. MalcolmX wasn't unpopular, even if today they're among the most, again, some of the most trending hashtags, some of the most viral videos. The prophets didn't win popularity contests, right? They didn't run for president. Inshallah, some of you will run for president. I'm not saying don't do so. But remember, the prophets didn't run for president. They weren't winning popularity contests. In fact, a good number of them were killed or tortured by their people, or at least every single one of them. I don't think there's an exception. They weren't insulted and criticized. So be loud and proud about your faith and inspire others to do so. And remember the big picture. Know that life is short. A friend of mine passed away about a month ago in Austin. He was 23 years old. I grew up with him in the Islamic school in Austin. It was Austin Peace Academy, kind of like Iman Academy. He passed away a month ago. No one expects a 23-year-old to die. Half of the Muslim community in Austin were there, they were crying. His wife, his mother, his sister, they were bawling. And all of us came back together and it was exciting. I hadn't seen some of my friends in like 10, 11 years. I left Austin in like 2007. So we got back together and we were all crying. It's really sad. No one expects a 23-year-old to die, right? And I'm reminding you, some of you are 18, some of you are 19, some of you are like me, 25 or less. You're roughly in that age. Among the things that you think about, I'm sure death isn't one of them. So remember the big picture. Our purpose is to please Allah, it's not to please people.